The story begins in the United States, in the city of Austin, Texas. The date was December 6, 1991. It was supposed to be an ordinary Friday night. Families were finishing dinner, businesses were closing for the evening, and the streets of Austin looked no different than any other winter night. But before sunrise, the city would witness one of the most horrifying unsolved crimes in American history. A case that, more than 3 decades later, still has no definitive answer. The location was a small frozen yogurt shop called I Can't Believe It's Yogurt. Inside the store, 2 teenage employees were preparing to close for the night. One of them was 17-year-old Eliza Thomas. The other was 17-year-old Jennifer Harbison. Closing time was only minutes away. As they cleaned the counters and finished their final tasks, 2 more girls arrived at the shop. The first was 13-year-old Amy Ayers, a close friend who had come to wait for the employees so that they could all leave together. The second was Jennifer's 15-year-old sister, Sarah Harbison. The plan was simple. Once the store was closed, all 4 girls would head home together. None of them knew they would never make it home. Hours passed. When the girls failed to return home, their families became increasingly worried. At first, they assumed the teenagers had stopped somewhere after work. But as more time passed, concern quickly turned into panic. Then something happened that shocked everyone nearby. People in the area suddenly noticed thick smoke pouring from the yogurt shop. Moments later, flames erupted from inside the building. Someone immediately called 911. Within minutes, firefighters arrived and began battling the fire. After the flames were finally brought under control, police investigators entered the burned building. What they discovered inside would horrify even veteran detectives. The bodies of all 4 girls were found inside the shop. Although the fire had badly damaged the crime scene, investigators could immediately tell that this was not simply a tragic fire. This was murder. The victims had been bound with pieces of their own clothing. Each of them had been shot in the head. The fire had almost certainly been set intentionally in an effort to destroy evidence and hide the killers' identities. Austin police were suddenly facing one of the biggest homicide investigations in the city's history. The murders shocked not only Texas, but the entire country. 4 teenage girls had been executed inside a neighborhood business. The brutality of the crime left the public demanding answers. Investigators immediately launched a massive homicide investigation. Autopsies confirmed that every victim had died from gunshot wounds to the head. Then, forensic experts made another important discovery. Ballistics testing revealed that 2 different firearms had been used during the murders. That meant investigators were likely searching for at least 2 offenders. This wasn't the work of a lone killer. It appeared to be a coordinated attack. Police interviewed employees, customers, friends, relatives, and anyone who might have information and connection. Hundreds of tips poured in. Every possible lead was investigated, but despite months of work, there was no suspect, no eyewitness who had seen the killers, no solid forensic evidence pointing to a specific individual. As the investigation stalled, the FBI joined the case, hoping federal resources could help solve one of America's most disturbing unsolved murders. Even with the FBI involved, the case remained cold. Years passed. Families continued waiting for answers. Investigators refused to give up, but every promising lead eventually led nowhere. Then, 8 years after the murders, everything suddenly changed. The year was 1999. Nearly 8 years had passed since the murders of Eliza Thomas, Jennifer Harbison, Sarah Harbison, and Amy Ayers. For the victims' families, every holiday, every birthday, and every anniversary served as another painful reminder that the killers were still free. Then, in what seemed like a major breakthrough, the Austin Police Department made a dramatic announcement. Investigators claimed they had finally solved the case. 4 men were arrested. Their names were Robert Springsteen, Michael Scott, Morris Pierce, and Forrest Wilborn. At the time of the murders in 1991, all 4 had been teenagers themselves. As soon as they started the arrests, it became public. Many people wondered why it had taken police 8 years to identify them. The answer went back to the original investigation. Shortly after the murders, detectives had interviewed these same 4 young men. One of them, Morris Pierce, had attracted investigators' attention because police recovered a .22 caliber handgun from him at a local shopping mall. Ballistics experts had already determined that one of the weapons used during the murders was a .22 caliber firearm. That discovery immediately made Pierce a person of interest. Police questioned all 4 teenagers extensively, but despite their suspicions, investigators couldn't establish any direct connection between the 4 young men and the crime scene. There were no fingerprints, no DNA, no eyewitnesses placing them inside the yogurt shop. No physical evidence linking them to the murders. Without enough evidence to file charges, police had no choice but to release them. For years, the investigation remained stalled. But in 1999, detectives believed they had enough information to bring the case back to life. The arrests made headlines across Texas. Many people believed justice had finally arrived. However, the celebration didn't last long. When prosecutors presented the case in a court, a major problem became obvious. Despite years of investigation, there was still no physical evidence connecting the 4 suspects to the murders. The prosecution's case simply wasn't strong enough. Without forensic proof, convictions would be nearly impossible. As a result, the court could not hold all four men responsible. The case began falling apart once again. Public confidence in the investigation suffered another major blow. For the Austin Police Department, it was a humiliating setback. Months later, a newly assigned investigative team reopened the case from the beginning. Rather than accepting previous conclusions, the new detectives reviewed every interview, every report, and every piece of evidence collected since 1991. After conducting their own investigation, they reached a familiar conclusion. They believed the same group of young men had committed the murders. Once again, Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott were taken to custody. This time, police claimed something extraordinary had happened. According to investigators, both men had confessed. Authorities stated that each suspect admitted involvement in the murders during police questioning. Based largely on those confessions, prosecutors dropped the cases against Maurice Pierce and Forrest Wilborn, believing Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott were the primary offenders. The trial moved forward. The prosecution argued that the confessions proved the case. Eventually, both men were convicted. For the families of the victims, it finally appeared that justice had been served, but that sense of closure wouldn't last. Defensive attorneys challenged the convictions. Their argument centered on one critical constitutional issue. During police interrogations, Robert Springsteen had blamed Michael Scott. Michael Scott had blamed Robert Springsteen. Each confession implicated the other. Yet neither defendant had been given the opportunity to confront or cross-examine the other in court regarding those statements. Their attorneys argued that this violated one of the most fundamental protections guaranteed under the United States Constitution. After reviewing the case, higher courts agreed. The convictions were overturned. Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott were eventually released after spending years behind bars. Once again, the Austin yogurt shop murders had no convicted killers. The investigation had returned to square one, and the biggest question remained exactly where it had been since December 1991. Who murdered the four girls? After Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott were released, the Austin Police Department found itself back where it had started. No convictions, no confirmed suspects, and no definitive answers. Despite the setbacks, investigators refused to abandon the case. Every time a new detective or homicide supervisor joined the department, the yogurt shop murders landed on their desk. Each investigator hoped they would finally be the one to solve the mystery that had haunted Austin for years. Then, advances in forensic science offered a new glimmer of hope. A newly appointed district attorney believed modern DNA technology might succeed where traditional police work had failed. Back in 1991, crime scene investigators had collected biological evidence from the victims. At the time, DNA testing was still in its infancy. Many of the advanced techniques available today simply didn't exist. The district attorney ordered the preserved evidence to be re-examined using newer forensic methods. One of those techniques was YSTR DNA testing, a specialized form of DNA analysis that focuses on male genetic material. Investigators hoped it might reveal something that earlier testing had missed. The results were astonishing. From biological evidence collected from one of the victims, forensic scientists detected the DNA profile of an unidentified male. For the first time in years, investigators believed they finally had a genuine lead. If they could identify the owner of that DNA, they might finally identify the killer. Police immediately compared the newly recovered DNA profile against Robert Springsteen, Michael Scott, Maurice Pierce, and Forrest Wellborn. The results shocked everyone. None of them matched. Not one. The discovery dramatically changed the direction of the investigation. If the DNA belonged to the killer, then the four men who had spent years under suspicion were almost certainly innocent. Investigators then considered another possibility. Perhaps the DNA had accidentally come from someone involved in processing the crime scene. Doctors, crime scene technicians, police officers, anyone who had handled the evidence. To eliminate that possibility, investigators collected DNA samples from approximately 100 people connected to the original investigation. Every sample was tested. Every result came back negative. Once again, the unidentified male remained exactly that, unidentified. In 2009, after years of legal proceedings, all remaining charges against Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott were officially dismissed. The courts cleared their names, although they had each spent nearly a decade in prison. There was no longer enough evidence to legally connect them to the murders. The case was officially unsolved once again. Years continued to pass. Then, in 2017, another detective reopened the investigation. This time, investigators turned to public genetic genealogy databases, hoping advances in DNA technology could identify the unknown male profile. The search appeared promising. Eventually, detectives found a DNA profile that seemed closely related to the mystery sample. Excitement spread through the investigative team. After 26 years, they believed they were finally close. But the excitement didn't last. The DNA profile in the database contained no identifying information. It had been submitted anonymously as part of population genetic study. Only a reference number existed. There was no name, no address, no identity. Investigators contacted the FBI, hoping federal records could reveal who the DNA belonged to. Initially, the FBI refused, citing federal privacy laws protecting participants in research databases. Once again, the investigation reached another dead end. Eventually, with assistance from members of Congress, federal authorities agreed to cooperate. But by then, forensic experts had identified another problem. The original biological sample collected in 1991 was extremely small. Technology had improved dramatically over the decades. but scientists warned that the evidence was too limited to identify a suspect with complete certainty. Without a definitive scientific match, prosecutors couldn't legally charge anyone. Rather than risk destroying the remaining evidence, experts recommended preserving it until future advances in DNA science could extract more information. Today, more than 3 decades after 4 teenage girls were murdered inside a small yogurt shop in Austin, Texas, the Austin yogurt shop murders remain officially unsolved. Investigators still believe modern DNA technology may one day reveal the identity of the unknown male whose genetic profile was recovered from the crime scene. The families of Eliza Thomas, Jennifer Harbison, Sarah Harbison, and Amy Ayers continue to hope that science will eventually succeed where every previous investigation has failed. For now, the case remains one of America's most haunting, unsolved mysteries. And somewhere, the person responsible may still be waiting to be identified and just roaming around free.
Well, that's all for tonight. And if you found the video interesting, please hit the like button. And if you want to hear more of such real incidents based on crime and horror, please do subscribe this channel. Good night. Take care.